Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm here. My name is Joanna Grant. I'm the project and grant coordinator for the Elevate Nevada program. I know I've met many of you many times before. Thank you so much for joining us again for one of our events. We launched at the conference, for those of you that were there, this Project Catalyst program and the mentorship program. And so thank you for joining us today. This program is a small grant program, also made possible by the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco through the Elevate Nevada initiative to do some statewide capacity building for affordable housing developers, especially in aligning with this Nevada Targeted Fund and the AHP program, so we can get some more of that money into Nevada and get some more affordable housing built. So thank you so much to the bank. So the Project Catalyst Fund is just one part of the Elevate Nevada program, and it is capacity building grants that we'll be issuing to affordable housing developers with projects in development right now for Elevate Nevada participants. And we're going to be using, or we're hoping that you'll use those capacity building grants to help leverage your projects that you have in the works and submit stronger applications for the AHP program by developing your organizational capacity. So that's the kind of main alignment with the AHP for the Catalyst funding program. And you'll be sending your applications and supplemental documents directly to me. The deadline is November 20th. And we have those applications online on the Elevate Nevada website under the Catalyst funding tab. And the application is pretty straightforward. So I wasn't going to go through it question by question today, but you're welcome to call or email me anytime as we're going through the application process. If you have questions, I'm happy to go through or clarify anything for you for that. And then there's a small budgeting attachment, and then there'll be some supplemental documents as well that you'll need to submit. Here we go. So I just wanted to go over some of the main criteria for the projects that are eligible for this Catalyst funding, program. And so the intention of the program really is to get more affordable housing built in the state of Nevada and really fill those gaps where we need inventory the most. So we're really prioritizing affordable housing that prioritizes units that are serving 50% AMI and below. And we really want to prioritize nonprofit developers and emerging developers in that. So that's how we kind of design some of these threshold criteria. So one, you must have an affordable housing project in the state of Nevada, because this is the Nevada Statewide Capacity Building Initiative. And then the alignment with the AHP General Fund and Nevada Targeted Fund is that we're really hoping to help you get your applications, get successful applications into the bank's AHP program, and especially the Nevada Targeted Fund. So we're really looking for projects that are intending or readying applications for the Nevada Targeted Fund. And sorry, I'm getting a lot of emails because of the link mix up. So we really are trying to prioritize those applications that are really trying to get the AHP Nevada Targeted Fund applications in and really have some successful, intend to be successful this year with that program. So that said, that doesn't mean that if you are awarded Catalyst funding, you're automatically eligible for AHP, or that you will be guaranteed a successful AHP application, right? So this is a separate program funded by the bank to help build statewide capacity in general. We do want to align with the AHP eligibility requirements because we're really trying to get those units built that are serving the greatest gap in our inventory across the state, supportive housing, nonprofit organizations, and serving very and extremely low income populations. But it's a separate program. So the Catalyst funding is really meant to build your organizational capacity overall, but we're hoping that by doing so, you'll also submit more successful applications for AHP and Nevada Targeted Fund. So if you do get awarded Catalyst funding, we will be working with you to try and get your application into the bank's AHP and Nevada Targeted Fund, but it's not necessarily connected in the way that if you don't get a higher score for having a Catalyst funding, you won't be automatically awarded. It's a separate program. So I just want to make that clear as well. And then the other threshold criteria is that you must have participated in the Elevate Nevada affordable housing programming at any level. That's pretty loosely defined, like this webinar counts as participating in Elevate Nevada programming. we're also going to be having a lot more programming. So if you haven't attended any of the supportive housing events or the development, education, and trainings, there'll be lots of opportunities. So don't let that stop you from applying if you have yet to attend. We also are really trying to nurture the next generation of developers, right? So we really are trying to use this Catalyst funding to support developers who have yet to win an AHP award or have little experience applying or are doing a new kind of development that would make them more competitive for AHP or Nevada targeted funds. These are also, just to be clear, these are program priorities, not necessarily required, right? So those threshold requirements are required, but these are really the program priorities. We're really trying to nurture those developers who haven't yet had a successful AHP application or maybe need some more organizational development and capacity building to do different kinds of housing. So housing that's serving special populations or lower income populations or supportive housing in particular. And so with that, we also have some priority projects. Like I said, we really want to prioritize those projects that are dedicating at least 60% of their units in development to serving populations at 50% AMI or below. Tribal housing and nonprofit developers, supportive housing projects, and projects that are readying applications for the 2023 AHP cycle. So that one coming up here in March, we really want to prioritize with this Catalyst funding to get those applications across the finish line. But if you are readying an application for 2024, your project will be ready for 2024. We're also accepting applications for the Catalyst funding as well, even if you are intending to not apply this year, but applying in 2024. So like I said, we have some events coming up. So if you haven't attended any of the Elevate Nevada education and training events yet, and you weren't at the conference, but you are interested in applying for the Catalyst funding program, you can attend any of these upcoming events. We have them ongoing. We're always adding new ones. So we have our supportive housing working group coming up every month, November 9th and 6th, or in December 6th. If any of you were at the Affordable Housing 101 development in Reno a couple of weeks ago, we're gonna be following up with that with another webinar on affordable housing finance with enterprise community partners on November 10th. And the registration is open for that on our website. And I'll put some links in the chat when I'm done talking. We also are going to be having a second one with Enterprise Managing Design and Construction, another virtual event on December 8th. And then we'll have some half-day workshops coming up in January and February with Enterprise as well. So you can bring your projects and talk to them. And we'll have some Nevada specific experts on affordable housing development at that in-person workshop as well. So keep an eye out for that when registration opens. So the RFP, like I said, is on our website on nvhousingcoalition.org under the Elevate and Catalyst funding tab. And I just wanted to make a quick note that the budgeting form is specific for your capacity building uses. So you don't necessarily have to have your entire development budget for like construction and all that stuff in there. It's really it's more of an organizational program budget. So that's kind of what we're looking forward there. And then we have a lot of, the RFP has a lot of information and examples of eligible uses of the program funds, but it's not an exhaustive list. So really, like I said, we're really trying to catalyze your projects and get your applications for AHP and the Nevada Targeted Fund across the finish line. So if you have some specific ideas of how to use these capacity building funds to improve your application or improve your project to make it more competitive for AHP or Nevada Targeted Fund, that's really what we're looking for. I don't know if anybody has come to the webinar with questions so far, but I'll be monitoring the chat and the Q&A, and I can start answering those as soon as we get started. But I'm going to let the bank talk a little bit about AHP and Nevada Targeted Fund while I take a look at that. Thank you. All right. Yeah, do you guys Alyssa, did you want to introduce yourself and Rose?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Joanna. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having us. My name is Alyssa Thunberg. I'm the Senior Director of the Affordable Housing Program, and I'm here also with Rose Swartz, who's a Senior Analyst on our Affordable Housing team. So we'll be going over our new program, the AHP Nevada Targeted Fund. And we're going to walk you through the application process, including our scoring and eligibility requirements, so that to help you identify whether this is a program that is actually going to work for you and your projects, and help you decide whether you want to apply to the Project Catalyst Fund. So if you aren't familiar with us, you might be wondering, what is the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco? So it's actually one of 11 cooperative lenders in the US. It was created by the US government in the 1930s to ensure liquidity for home mortgage lenders. And our name is actually a little bit misleading. We're not a federal agency. We're a private company, though we are heavily federally regulated. We don't make home loans, and we're not a bank that takes deposits. But we are a cooperative wholesale bank, so a bank for other banks, and we're owned by our retail financial institutions that are located within our bank's district of California, Arizona, and Nevada. So we make loans to those member banks that they then use to support housing, economic development, including home mortgages, construction loans, and small business loans. Since 1990, we've given at least 10% of our annual net income to our housing, economic development, and down payment assistance grant programs. And the Affordable Housing Program is actually the largest of those community investment programs. So out of that 10% annual contribution, we've awarded over $1.2 billion in AHP subsidies to produce over 150,500 units of affordable housing for low and moderate income households. So we're really excited that we now have a Nevada targeted fund in addition to our AHP general fund. We hope that that will help us better ensure that we're able to provide and support affordable housing for Nevadans. So we're going to dive into some specifics about our new Nevada targeted fund. And the AHP is typically a source of gap financing for rental and owner-occupied projects, just by the way that it's structured and our project caps. Our current maximum award amount for a project is $1 million, but this is also limited through our scoring, which I'll go into later. The AHP is actually quite flexible in what you can use it for and what it can cover. So it can cover acquisition costs, construction, rehab costs, also soft costs, and developer fee. There are a couple limitations, which you'll see in our application itself, but it's really quite flexible. You do need to find a member bank to partner with to submit an award, since all of our programs run through our members. The AHP is a grant as long as the project is affordable for 15 years, but it's structured in the form of a forgivable loan. So it's secured for 15 years by the member with a promissory note and deed of trust, and then at the end it's forgiven. It can only be used to assist households that are at or below 80%, although there are ways that multifamily buildings can have a mix of different incomes, which we'll get into later. And the program is structured in a way that rental and ownership projects compete against each other. So there's no specific set aside for a type of project. So here are some of our basic eligibility requirements. Obviously, the Nevada Targeted Fund is only for projects in Nevada, so you'll only be competing with other projects in the state, not against California and Arizona, as happens in our general fund. If you have a project that's already complete, unfortunately, that is ineligible. So if you have a certificate of occupancy or notice of completion, when applications are due, you would not be able to apply. We have some eligibility for project sponsors. So you must have at least 1 year of relevant experience. You've got to be able to show that you do have sufficient capacity to undertake the project and the compliance responsibilities associated with the award. And for a rental project, you also have to have an ownership interest in the project for the full 15 years. So if you're an organization that has experience with services or management of affordable housing, but you don't have a lot of direct development experience, we will probably want to see that you have a development partner who brings that experience to the team, or that you have, specific team members that are part of the project that are going to bring those skills to your development. Our program is based on scoring. So you'd commit to scoring elements in your application. And if there are changes after the award is made that affect those scoring commitments, you do have to do a modification request from us. And there's a potential that if it really changes a lot, that you could lose the award. So you want to make sure that your scoring commitments are really achievable when you make them. And lastly, projects awarded AHP funding must comply with all fair housing and affirmative marketing requirements. So here's a timeline. Our application materials are going to be available on our website in January of next year. We're also going to hold application webinars in mid-January, which are going to cover all the essential information about submitting an application. Our presentation today is just going to give you an overview of the program and its scoring categories, but our application webinars are going to go into a lot more depth about documentation and financial requirements. So we definitely highly recommend you attend one of those if you're going to apply. The applications are due in March and award announcements will be made in June 2023. And once you have an award, both the member and the sponsor are going to have to attend a compliance webinar before requesting disbursement of the funds. And then after you've attended that webinar, you can request disbursement at any time as long as your project has all of its permanent financing secured and construction is imminent or underway. So every 6 months until the project's complete, you'll get a project progress report called the semi-annual survey that helps us track whether it's moving forward and help us to identify any obstacles to completion. We do have a deadline, so you must complete construction and draw down and expend the AHP funds within 4 years of award approval. And we want to see that you're making reasonable progress towards completion during those 4 years. And once you're complete, we do conduct compliance monitoring, which we call initial monitoring, just to confirm that the project actually fulfilled those commitments that it made originally to get the award. So again, the compliance period for rental projects is 15 years after the project's complete. And for owner-occupied projects, it's only for 5 years. And after that time, the loan's forgiven for both types of projects. For rental projects, during the 15 years, we're looking to see that the project is still meeting its scoring and affordability commitments. If your project isn't funded with low-income housing tax credits, we are also going to check in periodically through our long-term monitoring process just to review a rent roll and income documentation for tenants that are living there. And for a rental project, if your project is no longer operated as affordable housing during those 15 years, then the entire subsidy does need to be repaid. For owner-occupied projects during those 5 years, the owner-occupant must occupy the home as their primary residence. And if they were to sell within the 5 years, the subsidy is repaid, but it's on a prorated basis based on how long they were in the home. So we don't have our application released yet, but we do have outlined the 13 scoring categories here and in the implementation plan that's on our website. We'll have a link at the last slide here. So you can get an idea of whether your project's going to score well. IP is a pretty long technical document, but it does go into great detail about how each category is scored and what we're looking for if you or a consultant have time to take a look. Most of the categories are really pretty straightforward, and all of the categories are actually self-scorable in the application that we'll release in January, so you can use that document to estimate your score later as well. This is the first year for the Nevada Targeted Fund, so we don't really have a benchmark for what a winning score is, but of course, higher is always better. If you're scoring less than 50 points, it's probably unlikely that you'll be able to win an award, but we really don't know. So in this first year, it probably doesn't hurt to apply. It is actually impossible to get all 100 points since some questions are only relevant to rental projects and others are only relevant to owner projects. This helps keep the scoring balanced and levels the playing field so that we're not just awarding one type of project. And points can only be awarded if the documentation required is submitted and clear. So again, please attend one of our webinar sessions in January. We also have really thorough instructions in the application itself and in our reference guide that will also be released in January to make sure that you get all the points that your project is qualified for. Okay, so getting into the scoring categories, targeting is worth up to 20 points. It is the largest point category that we have since we're trying to incentivize serving lower income individuals. You can see we have separate scoring methodologies for rental and owner occupied projects as outlined on the slide. And for rental projects, you can include market rate units or over 80% AMI units. Those would just be over 80% AMI would be unrestricted. But as you change the unit mix there, it is going to affect your score. So you can play with that in our application when it comes out. Rental projects, there is a minimum threshold to be eligible for AHP. You must have at least 20% of the units targeted to 50% AMI households. For owner projects, everyone has to be below 80% AMI. So there's no way to serve over 80% AMI households with ownership projects under our regulation. Donated property is next, and here we're rewarding projects that are receiving land for no or a steeply discounted value from a third party. And our threshold here is that 20% of the project needs to meet this to get any points. It can be prorated if you have like a couple different parcels and one is donated and the others aren't donated. And we do have a couple different scenarios that qualify for points here. The first is just a straight donation. So if you're getting the site from an unrelated third party for $1,000 or less, or you have an annual long-term lease payment that's $1,000 or less, then you're eligible for up to 5 points. If you're acquiring the property from a federal agency at any price that's higher than $1,000, you would get 1 point. And then the third way to get points is if you are acquiring land from a third party, but it's just at a significant discount to fair market value. So that means you're getting it for 20% or less of fair market value, or looking at it the other way, you're getting at least an 80% discount. That is prorated, or it's going to be scaled based on the size of the discount that you're getting. So you'd get 1 point for purchasing at 20% of fair market value and 4 points at 5% or less. And for all of these, the donation has to be an arm's length transaction. So if you're a nonprofit developer and you're just selling the property to your affiliate, we're not giving points for that. It has to be a totally separate entity that is donating the property. And if you think your project qualifies for these, definitely check out our implementation plan. It's a pretty detailed section and there's a lot of information there. Here we award points for the involvement of a nonprofit sponsor in the project and also evaluate the roles and responsibilities of that entity to make sure that they're qualified and active in the development. Entities that are going to qualify for points are a nonprofit, Native American tribe, state housing agency, local housing authority, and you could also be a state or political subdivision of a state, though we almost never get those. For rental projects, if you're one of those entities, then the next 3 points are allocated based on your ownership interest. So 3 points if you own a majority of the project. If it's a limited partnership with tax credits, then we're looking at the GP ownership percentage here. And then if you have between 20%, less than 50%, you get 1.5 points. And then if you're less than 20%, you get no points for ownership. For owner-occupied projects, we're awarding points for development activities where the sponsor is playing an integral role. That can include planning and design, financing, construction, homebuyer counseling, income qualification, etc. And then the last 2 points are just awarded based on the percentage of developer fee that the nonprofit's going to receive. And that includes all future payouts because we don't want the nonprofit just getting stuck with the deferred portion of the fee. Our next category is first-time homebuyer. This is really straightforward. It's up to 7 points for owner-occupied projects that are for first-time homebuyers. It is prorated, so you could get points if you just have some first-time homebuyers, and we do have a minimum of 20% reserved there to qualify. Next, we have homeless housing. It's a 6-point category, and it can be awarded to projects for transitional housing or also permanent housing, as long as you're setting aside units for homeless individuals or households. We do have a really detailed homeless definition in our IP, so if you're planning on serving homeless households, definitely reference that, because we do require documentation at project completion that certifies each tenant's homeless status, and it needs to match our definition. We are currently aligned with HUD's continuum of care definition, and we unfortunately can't accept at-risk households as part of that. So you want to be careful about how many units you're reserving there. And here again, we have a 20% minimum, and that'll get you 3 points. And then the remaining 3 points are prorated based on how many of the total units are reserved for homeless households. And we do have a minimum allowable stay requirement also. So transitional housing projects are eligible as long as they allow people to stay for at least 6 months. We do also have a transitional housing definition in the application. And we are limiting projects to only scoring points in either homeless households or special needs populations. So you can't get points in both, even if you do have residents you think would meet both. So now I'm going to pass it off to Rose, who will take us through the rest of our presentation.
Okay, thanks, Alyssa. Good morning, everyone. I'll take us to the next category, which is special needs. So here we award up to 5 points based on the percentage of units reserved for special needs populations. And those are listed here on the slide under the second bullet point. A minimum of 20% of the project units must be reserved to get any points here. And then points are prorated if not all of the units are reserved for special needs households. So for example, if 50% of the units are reserved for one or a combination of these populations, you'd receive 50% of the points or 2.5 points. Again, you cannot reserve or receive points in both this category and homeless housing. So you'll need to make a choice there if you do have households that would qualify for both. Next is housing for households requiring large units. Very simple, straightforward category. If at least 20% of the total project units have 3 or more bedrooms, then you receive 3 points. Next is rural housing, also a pretty straightforward category. If at least 20% of the units are in a rural area as deemed by a government agency, then you can receive up to 8 points. Points can be prorated here. It's very unlikely, but if you do have a scattered site project where some units are rural and some are not, then you could get partial points for those rural units. And again, rural status can be designated by a state or a federal government agency, such as the USDA. And the USDA does provide this information on their website under rural services. Next is community stability. This category is about determining how your project benefits the community at large and contributes to stabilizing the neighborhood where it's located. It's a pretty involved category and there are some specific documentation requirements. So please check this section out in our reference materials just to make sure that you're compiling everything you need to submit for points here. There are 6 subcategories. I'll just touch on them briefly. The first is revitalizing neighborhoods. Here you can receive 5 points for a variety of features. The first is if your project involves new construction on an infill site. So if the lot is undeveloped and surrounded by existing infrastructure and development, that would qualify as an infill project. You can also receive these 5 points for adaptive reuse of a non-residential building or for substantial rehabilitation of an existing residential building, as long as it prolongs the useful life of that property by 15 years. Next, we have our preservation subcategory. Here you can receive 2 points if you have an existing project that's at risk of losing its affordability within 4 years of the application deadline. That could be through an expiring rental or affordability agreement or through the qualified contract process. Next, we have proximity to transit and amenities. Overall, this feature is worth up to 4 points. For transit, the project must be located within 1/3 of a mile of a specific transit stop, and then you receive a 1/2 point for each unique transit line up to a maximum of 2 points. And then for amenities, it's similar. You must be within 1/3 of a mile radius of the specific amenity. And those amenities must be relevant and accessible to the project's residents. So for example, if you have an all senior development, we are not going to award points for it being next door to an elementary school. So we really want to make sure those amenities are useful to the project's population. And the scoring there is similar. It's a 1/2 point for each unique amenity up to a maximum of 2 points. Again, please review the documentation requirements here. They are pretty involved, and we will go into detail on those in our application webinars. Next is sustainable developments. Here you can get between 1 and 4 points based on the level of certification that the project achieves. We do accept Nevada Housing Division's Silver State Sustainable Home certifications, and those are worth 1, 2, or 3 points based on the level. And then we also accept LEED, Greenpoint, Enterprise Community certifications, and for rehabs, we will accept HERS improvement ratings. We do have a 4-point option for projects that achieve a net zero energy certification, but we do want to emphasize here not to overcommit. So if at the start of the project you think the project can achieve LEED Gold, but then you end up not being able to meet that, at the end of the project, then those points would be lost, and that could jeopardize the AHP award. So please just commit to something that you think is achievable for the project. And then the last 2 points here, we have an economic integration component. So you receive 1 point if the project is located in an upper income census tract. If it's a scattered site project, all units must be in an upper income census tract to qualify for that point. And then lastly, we award points for no household displacement. So if the site is vacant and unoccupied, or if there's an acceptable relocation plan in place, you'd receive 1 point. Okay, next is project readiness. Here we award points to projects that have some measure of site control. So it's a full 5 points for full site control if you already own the land or the building that you're going to develop, and 2.5 points for partial site control. So if you have an agreement to purchase that land or building. Owner occupied projects have a few other options for points here. You can receive 2.5 points if you have buyers identified and income qualified, or 2.5 points if your project is a scattered site down payment assistance program. This category is capped at 5 points though, so if you already have full site control, you are maxed out. For native housing, we award points if the project owner is a tribal government, an agency of a tribal government, a tribally designated housing entity, or an entity created in accordance with tribal law, or if the project has tribal funding included as a source in the project budget. So that could be Indian CDBG, Indian CSBG, Indian Health Service funds, or NAHASDA funding. And then the amount of tribal funding to receive points must be at least 5% of the total development costs, or $100,000. Okay, next is small rental projects. This category is very straightforward. Rental projects with 25 units or fewer receive 7 points, and other projects do not receive points here. The last scoring category is subsidy per unit. It's worth up to 7 points, and the points are prorated by taking the total amount of subsidy requested divided by the number of income restricted units. The scoring for rental and owner projects is slightly different. For rental projects, you receive a full 7 points for requesting $20,000 per unit or less, and the points sort of move on a declining scale until you reach $40,000 per unit or more, and at that point you receive 0 points. For owner projects, the scoring is similar, it's just that the range is slightly higher. So owner-occupied projects receive a full 7 points for requesting $25,000 per unit or less, down to 0 points at $45,000 per unit or less. And again, the application allows you to self-score, so you can kind of play around with the subsidy request and see what your score would be. We do often get the question, how much should I request? It's sort of a balance. We encourage applicants to request what the project truly needs to fill its financing gap, but we understand that this sometimes needs to be balanced with what the project needs scoring wise to be competitive. So you might want to just take a look at that and make that decision. Okay, that is all of our scoring categories. Now we're going to talk about the how we evaluate a project's need for the AHP subsidy and its financial feasibility. This section is super high level, but this is a very important part of the application process. So we definitely encourage you, again, to attend one of our application webinars where we go into much more detail and we take a look at the financial workbook during that webinar. So again, this is very high level, but in determining need for subsidy, we look to see that the project's sources of funding, including AHP, equal the projected development costs. We look to see that the AHP is filling a project's financing need that's not able to be covered by another funding source. And we also look to see that the project's only asking for enough AHP to truly fill that financing gap. So if there are more sources than uses, then it seems to us that some of the AHP funds that are requested might not be needed, and then we start to question the need for the AHP subsidy. If there are more uses than sources, then it appears to us that the project is still short funding and we wouldn't consider it feasible. Just a note that you don't need to have all your sources committed at the time of application, but we do want to see that the budget is balanced. And then for rental projects, we review the 15-year operating pro forma to make sure that the project has positive cash flow throughout the 15-year compliance period. or that there's at least a sustainable source of capitalized reserves for any projected deficits. We also look to make sure there isn't too much cash flow, since that could indicate to us that the project could take on a conventional loan instead of using AHP funds. We also have a set of financial benchmarks that help us evaluate the project's need for subsidy and feasibility. These include operating cost per unit, construction cost per square foot, management fee per unit, among others. And then if your project does deviate from one of those benchmarks, an explanation must be provided. And in some cases, we do require third-party documentation. So again, that's a super high-level review of the financial component of the application. There's a lot more to it, but just wanted to be mindful of everyone's time. And then to wrap up, we just wanted to give some examples of different projects we've funded in the AHP General Fund in the past. This is not an exhaustive list, but just wanted to give a few highlights. And the first is Richards Crossing. This is a new construction project in Carson City. It was completed in 2017. It's 39 units with some units set aside for veterans. And then besides AHP, it was financed with tax credits, home funds, and CDBG. Next, this is a project located in Arizona called Landmark Senior Living. It's an all-senior development with lots of on-site amenities. It was also completed in 2017 and financed with tax credits, city and state funds, and owner equity. And lastly, here's the Shasta Hotel, an example of a rehab project. This project was a full renovation of a historic hotel located in downtown Sacramento. The AHP fund supported critical life safety upgrades, as well as ADA upgrades and the addition of solar panels. This project has units for low-income residents, as well as formerly homeless residents, and it was financed with tax credits, state financing, City of Sacramento redevelopment financing, and of course, AHP. All right, so if you have any additional questions beyond what we'll cover in the Q&A or what we already talked about, please reach out to one of us. We'd be more than happy to help you get those questions answered. And please also save the date for those application webinars. They'll be held in mid-January, and you can register for them starting in mid-December by going to the events page of our website, which is listed in this blue box here. And then once these slides get sent out, which I assume NHC will do for us, you'll also have the link to our implementation plan, which provides lots of detail on our program. Okay, I'll pass it back to Joanna to take us to our Q&A.
Thank you so much, Rose and Alyssa. We have a question in the chat. Can you advise the best way to identify a potential member sponsor for potential applicant if they don't have a bank who is already a member?
Yeah, I can take that. So we often recommend that you first look at like who's on your board and who you have banking relationships already. I can put a link in a couple links in the chat about just our current members, and then also a link to previously awarded projects, which will show you who participates a lot in the AHP program. And if you don't recognize anyone there, then you can reach out to us and we can see if we can try to make a connection.
Can you talk about maybe I might have missed this, but did you talk about how much the AHP and Nevada Targeted Fund awards can be up to?
Yeah, they can be up to $1 million per project. But again, you'll want to look at the subsidy per unit scoring category and see, and also your project budget and see, what is your financing gap and what makes sense to request.
Does anybody else have any questions about, I know I went through the Catalyst funding really fast, but you can see that the AHP application is really gap financing for projects that are in development, that really have some secured financing already, or really working towards completing the project. And then the Catalyst funding is meant to help that organization build their organizational capacity to operate the development, to get through the application process. So some of the eligible uses for that would be hiring a financing consultant to help you through the AHP application process, or hiring some technical assistance if you're doing a supportive housing project and you've never done a supportive housing project before. So maybe hiring a consultant to talk more about, to develop your capacity to operate supportive housing or housing for formerly homeless or very low income individuals. Do we have any more questions? Did we miss any questions in the chat? I know that there was a lot going on there in the beginning. I can talk a little bit more about the Catalyst funding application process.
Hey, Juana.
Yeah.
This is Christine. Can you just, Rose and Alyssa, can you talk about how some of the potential applicants here, if they're not quite ready for AHP, how the AHEAD grant may also be something they may want to consider for capacity building if they're not quite at the development phase?
Sure. Yeah, our AHEAD program is very different from AHP. It's focused on economic development, but it can fund really a really wide range of things. So if you have a new program you're starting, or if you're, trying to get started in development, it could potentially be a source of funds for you. Our application period for that, I think we usually accept applications in June of each year, and then announce in September. And they're much smaller awards, so it's up to $50,000, but I think we usually award around $25,000. But there's information about that on our website as well, so you can look into that if you're interested. And it might, be a good source for other kinds of programs that you have as well, because it can be kind of social service oriented, where AHP we can't fund any social services. So I'll put another link in the chat for that.
So I'll just talk a little bit more about the application process for the Catalyst funding. Now that we have a good idea of how it aligns with AHP and the Nevada Targeted Fund, there are actually it's very flexible, the Catalyst Fund, and it really is meant to help you score higher on the AHP or Nevada Targeted Fund applications, and also to foster your development experience. So even though we really are aligning with this release of the Nevada Targeted Fund, what we also are really doing is nurturing emerging developers in Nevada, right? We want, not just for this year's application round, but we want to get more money into Nevada for development in future rounds too. So anything that would really be bolster your organization to increase your skills or ability to have successful funding applications and develop new projects to fill those inventory gaps for the most vulnerable or most needed Nevadans. That's really what we're trying to do. So the eligible uses, there's a long list there, but it is quite flexible. The application questions really go into the development, your project development and where you are in that process, but we're really wanting to sort of see the alignment with your capacity building and how you're going to sustain your organizational capacity after the grant, after you leverage those Catalyst funding. So we're really kind of trying to do a lot with these small capacity building grants, but it really is to help us build across the state our capacity to develop more and start a pipeline of projects in affordable housing. So think about things in terms of those questions when you're looking through the application and deciding if you want to apply for this capacity building and Catalyst funding. There's also maybe some reporting or reimbursement questions. So these are sub-grants and they are going to be reimbursement based. So you'll have a program budget for, if that's a consultant, a financial consultant, and if you're selected for the Catalyst funding, you'll meet with me and the Elevate advisory team, and we'll develop a grant contract based on that, and then you'll submit for reimbursement. But if there's any struggles with that, like I said, we're really open. We really want to help and support development. So please don't hesitate to come with questions. And if you have some special needs for the funding that you haven't seen listed in the RFP, or you're not sure if it qualifies, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Do you have any final questions about upcoming events or about AHP or Nevada Targeted Fund or examples of projects? Pretty quiet. Do you guys have any other final things to say, Rose or Alyssa or Christine, that we might have missed?
No, I just would reiterate that you can reach out to us anytime with questions. The application can be pretty involved and detailed. So if you have questions as you're going through it, we can't really pre-review documentation and give you a guaranteed answer one way or the other, whether it will qualify for points, but we can provide a lot of general guidance and assistance and point you in the right direction for things. So yeah, please reach out with any questions.
If you are selected for the Catalyst funding project grants, some of the requirements are to attend some of those webinars for the AHP and Nevada Targeted Fund, and that will really help you with that application process. And we'll be in close contact too, talking about the process and getting you. That's what to leverage the capacity building fund to get you through the application process, because we know it can be a tricky one. It's pretty involved in the compliance. It could be a lot of compliance questions, especially if you're a new developer or developing a new type of project. So that's kind of what this program is for, is really giving that added support for that process.
Yeah, I just want to thank the bank and the whole team, and they really are as available as they seem. So thanks, Alyssa and Rose, and it was great to see you last week in Reno, of course. And I would just add, the coalition has received 2 AHEAD grants for capacity building, of course, prioritizing affordable housing. So thank you, bank. Our grants were $37,000 each. So again, if you're not quite ready for AHP or have some programs that you think might be supported, I highly encourage it. And if anyone has questions, I'm happy to share. It is a little trickier on the compliance than some just foundation grants. And please reach out to Joanna if you have any questions. We do encourage and realize that the timeline's short for the 2023 AHP. I saw a question there. Of course, if you apply for the Project Catalyst funds and get an award, your intent should be to apply for AHP. It could be that you go through the process and maybe you're not quite ready. So we do also understand that, but it would be your intent to apply for AHP. But we recognized the short timeline. So do you want to encourage also, if you're thinking about a 2024 application and you see the flexibility of use. And also, Alyssa and Rose, you can confirm, but projects can submit for the Nevada Targeted Fund as well as the general fund. Is that correct? They can fit into both pools of funding?
Yeah, you can submit to both. It's more likely that you'll be competitive usually in the targeted fund, but you can definitely submit to both. You can only get an award in one. So you're not going to get 2 awards if you apply to both.
That's good to know.
But you can apply to both if you have some free time.
Great. Thank you. So yeah, thanks, Joanna. And then also I did put a link earlier. We do have a mentorship program for any of you that have team members that might be new, or if you're newer yourself to affordable housing and are interested in some one-on-one professional development. Mentorship is, I do it informally. I have so many mentors around. So mentorship is how I've definitely built my own professional capacity. And I strongly encourage and recommend that you check out our mentorship program. We'll limit the first year for sure.
Definitely. And if you are still in those really early phases of development and you don't think that you're quite ready for AHP, but we do have those affordable housing finance, development, construction 101s coming up. And then we're going to be having those in-person workshops with Robin and Evelyn in January and February. So now's the time to start really working on those projects. And if you're really in that early development, we can try and get you to the finish line in 2 or 3 years instead of this year or next year. It's a long process, development. Thank you so much, Alyssa and Rose, and thank you so much, everybody. Please, again, don't hesitate to reach out and check. I put the link to the website in the chat so that you can go look at that RFP in detail, call me or email me with questions, and sign up for those upcoming events. And have a great afternoon.